the fun block, Democratic hypocrisy. And this is one where...
evergreen.
How much do you hear? Yeah, and look, Republican hypocrisy was the A block, so we got a true horseshoe going on here in the show. What do we have right now? We have a situation where Democrats and the media, CNN, all we hear constantly is democracy, January 6th, what heroes Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger are. And yet, whenever it came to money and dollars, the DCCC and the Democratic Party, not just as a national organization, but on a micro level, has spent now millions of dollars propping up Republicans in primaries who are pro-Stop the Steal and who support not only Trump's vision of Stop the Steal, but possibly trying to overturn an election in the future, something that they have claimed is an absolute threat to American democracy. However, the millions of dollars show us that they want to try and prop these people up because they have a theory that they'll be easier to beat. And we'll get to that possibly in a second. However, Nancy Pelosi, whenever she was confronted with this, something that even CNN is calling her out for, she defends it 100%. Let's take a listen.
I said that we need a strong Republican Party, not a cult of personality. That didn't mean we shouldn't have a strong Democratic Party as well. And the political decisions that are made out there are made in furtherance of our winning the election because we think the contrast between Democrats and Republicans as they are now is so drastic that we have to win.
We have to win. That's the justification for everything. But the perfect articulation really wasn't just from Nancy. It was from James Carville, who, again, credit to CNN, even they're like, hey, come on now. Like, how can you talk about all this pro-democracy stuff, but then Peter Meyer, who's a person who voted for impeachment, is now having dollars spent to prop up his Republican primary opponent, who's going after him solely for voting for Trump impeachment.
Who is a total lunatic.
Yeah, and he has called their rhetoric, quote, absolute bullshit, Peter Meyer. And he's like, hey, you literally cannot square this. James Carville, of course, comes out and defends her 100%, not just on the tactics of it, but the morality of it. Let's take a listen.
What do you think, James? I mean, is your party playing with fire?
I love that woman. I just worship her. And the idea of a political campaign is to win the election. It acts in its own interest. And let's take Pennsylvania. It clearly was in Josh Shapiro's interest that the Republicans nominate Doug Mastriano. I've done the same thing. I would do the same thing. I don't see any ethical or moral problem with doing this. And again, I think most of the opposition to this is from the pontifical class, mostly located on the coast. I don't see anything wrong with this.
I think a lot of ordinary Americans would have trouble understanding why you were propping up some of the worst, most deranged conspiracy theorists in the country. Yes. I don't think regular people would have a hard time understanding that or seeing that as extraordinarily gross. Peter Meyer, who we've referred to a couple of times, who again is this Republican incumbent who voted for Trump's impeachment after January 6th and who is facing, a conspiracy theorist opponent in the GOP primary, and Democrats have decided to boost that dude, the crazy one, because they think he'll be easier to beat in the general election. He's out with a piece at Common Sense, and I think he makes a really great point here. He says, listen, party leaders like Sean Maloney, the head of the DCCC, that's their campaign committee, have claimed that we are in an existential conflict between defenders of democracy and advocates of authoritarianism. Quote, it's not just about Trump, Representative Maloney said late last month on MSNBC. It's about a MAGA Republican movement that is defined by serious things like attacks on our democracy. He warned it's going to be those MAGA Republicans who take away your rights, your benefits, and your freedoms. So if you are in, again, the quote, an existential conflict between defenders of democracy and advocates of authoritarianism, why are you propping up this side? I mean, it really is gross. And listen, some of these things are more theoretical than others, but we've talked about the fact that Democrats backed Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania gives their governors broad powers. You get to pick his own Secretary of State. This is someone who worked hand in glove with Trump in his loony attempts to overturn the last election. He has come up in the January 6th hearings. That's how central to the plot that he ultimately was. And this is someone who Democrats intentionally tried to put in a position to possibly win the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania. And by the way, he will not tell Pennsylvania voters who he would pick for Secretary of State.
Of course he won't.
Of course.
Right.
Because they would be horrified if he did come out and actually be upfront with them about who he would pick. This is it just shows you that all of the things that Democrats are saying, they don't really mean. They just don't really mean it, because you can't say the things they've been saying and then go and get behind candidates like this.
Yeah, look, I mean, with Mastriano, we've laid it out. It could legitimately ignite a constitutional crisis because of the amount of deference the Supreme Court actually gives states whenever it comes to actually appointing their electors. So this would be some seriously crazy stuff. And what I have come to believe with the Stop the Steal folks is believe them. They are telling you what they want to do. They're like, we think the election was stolen. They're like, we think that we should be able to decide based upon criteria that we arbitrarily decide. We're going to, fake around ballot boxes and all that. And based upon that, we're willing to literally appoint fake electors to send to Congress. Okay, I believe you. I believe you when you say that. And yet, these people say that this is the biggest threat to democracy in the history of the world. This could ignite a civil war. And you're spending millions of dollars to prop these people up. Look, Mastriano, polls aren't great for him right now. Guy could still win.
Oh, yeah.
Very easily. I mean, this is a state where Trump lost by, 150,000 votes? Something like that. In Pennsylvania, Biden, I have this in my monologue talking about Dr. Oz, he's at minus 25 favorability. The gas goes up by another $1.50 between now and Election Day. Yeah, I think Doug Mastriano could easily become the next governor of Pennsylvania. Now what? You have a very big role. We've talked previously. I think that Claire McCaskill beating Todd Akin and funding him may have been one of the most overlearned lessons in the history of Democratic politics. They're like, well, it worked out this one time in 2012 in Missouri, so let's do it all the time. It's like, well, sometimes Republicans win elections despite whatever they may actually think, and you're going to be in a real pickle nationally. But this is all fake, because at the end of the day, it's probably better for them if some of these people do win, because they can say, oh, look how crazy these people are. It's like how they spend all this time talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's all fake. This whole thing.
That is a good point, too, is that ultimately they feel like they benefit from, like, the more insane the Republican Party is, the less they have to do to prove to voters. They can just say, look at those people. Those people are insane. Easy. So it is kind of does kind of work out for them in the end, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just so disgusting.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.